Hello and welcome to the City Commission chambers for the City of Kalamazoo for our Committee of the Whole meeting. This meeting starts at 5 o'clock and is a work meeting that we have in advance of our business meeting that starts at 7 this evening. So I'm calling this meeting of the City Committee of the Whole for the City Commission of Monday, August 1st, 2022. And our first order of business is roll call. Clerk Borling.
Commissioner Decker.
Present.
Commissioner Hess.
Present.
Commissioner Hoffman.
Present.
Commissioner Juarez. Commissioner Pradel. Vice Mayor Cooney.
Present.
Mayor Anderson.
Here. May I have a motion to excuse Commissioner Pradel and Commissioner Juarez from the Committee of the Whole meeting?
So moved.
A motion made by Commissioner Hess,
Second.
supported by Commissioner Decker. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, nay. Thank you. City Manager Ritzma, Communications.
Nothing, Your Honor.
Thank you very much. Now is an opportunity for public comments. These public comments will be limited to 2 minutes here at our Committee of the Whole meeting. If you have comments to make, please come to the podium, give us your name and whether you live in the city. And I want to remind people that you can call in to make public comments as well. Deputy City Manager Chamberlain, do you want to give us that number?
Sure. It is 888-382-9556.
Thank you so much, DCM Chamberlain. I would suggest you call in now. We will start with anyone who's in the chambers who'd like to make a comment. If there's anyone here who would like to take advantage of this opportunity, please come to the podium.
Hey, my name's Benjamin Stanley. I live on the north side. Recently, I was made aware that I have a hit out on me by my neighbor's boyfriend. That is how the city of Kalamazoo feels about violence. Nothing will be done about it. Nothing whatsoever. I understand that. Windows were smashed out of my house. Police won't make a report. Tires were slashed in my car. I called the mayor on his personal number or texted him and said, this is not acceptable, over and over. And finally, the cops somebody told them to show up on the corner of North and Stewart. I'm assuming that was you. I don't know who else would have done it, maybe my lawyer, but I don't think so. That's too much. That's too much. That's not acceptable. Fear-mongering is not what this city needs. Love and support is what this city needs. I have somebody who loves and supports me every day, right here, everywhere I go. And you guys have repeatedly tried to turn that into a weapon to hurt me. Tried to arrest me right here in this building for bringing her in without a license, which is, in effect, a criminal offense on your part. But do you stand up and say, what we did was wrong, I'm sorry, we won't do it again? You go, no, that's not what you do. You hide stuff, you avoid responsibility, you go, I don't know what you're talking about. And then you give me a ticket because I had a dandelion in my front yard for $127 when I could go buy dandelions from the co-op for 25 bucks a pound.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone else who would like to take advantage of this opportunity in the chambers? Seeing no one, DCM Chamberlain, do we have anyone who has called in?
We'll go ahead and check right now. It appears we do not have any calls, sir.
Thank you very much. I appreciate your work on that. Manager Ritzma, what is on our work session agenda for this evening?
Tonight we have a presentation on the commercial zoning review project by our city planner, Christina Anderson. And Christina, you want to come forward?
Just one moment while we load. That's not good. Good evening. So what I have for you this evening is a zoning presentation. It focuses primarily on the work that we have started for the commercial zoning district update. It starts a little broader just to kind of put everybody on the same page for the zoning work that we've done the last couple of years, why we've made the decisions that we've done in terms of updating the zoning code since we have several new commissioners. So first of all, when we finished the master plan, we knew that we needed to update our zoning because the zoning should be a document that is used to implement what the community vision is as expressed in the master plan. So when the plan was approved in 2017, we got to work pretty quickly in 2018, but we first needed to figure out how we were going to do the work. And so we chose to incrementally update our zoning code rather than do it all at once. And we chose to prioritize areas in the zoning code that we thought were having the biggest negative impact on neighborhoods, on ability to do housing infill and commercial infill development. In 2005, which is the last time the zoning code was updated, the zoning code was done and it was in Appendix A, which is part of the municipal code. Rather than tweak that document, we chose to take the sections in Appendix A, review them, make some edits, and then put them in a new zoning document, Chapter 50, also in the Code of Ordinances. What this process allowed us to do is start with a pretty clean slate, since the document was going to be very different than it was back in 2005, but it does mean that during this process, we have two documents, which is a bit of a challenge, but I think in the end will give us the result that we want. Very quickly, I've now put this slide every time I talk about zoning because I think it's important to think about it this way. We hear about zoning as if it's a silver bullet, right? That's going to change everything. Zoning is important, but it's a policy, and it's a base policy, right? It is something that helps to shape where a building goes on a lot, how tall it can be, how it relates to the street and the other buildings. It talks about permitted uses, and it talks about how to administer these rules. And it needs to align with that master plan vision. But again, that's just the base. And I showed this graphic because there are so many other layers that need to be managed in order to achieve whatever it is that you want to achieve. Affordable housing, commercial development, industrial project, right? Who owns the property? How do you obtain ownership? How do you pay for plans? How do you get contractors in this and materials right now? So all these other layers kind of go on top of zoning. You want it to be right, but it's not going to be a light switch. It's not going to automatically change to achieve that goal in and of itself. So here's what we've been doing since the master plan. We've done 7 code updates. We started with what we call residential core repair work. And these were changes that we made to the residential districts in Appendix A, knowing that it was going to be a little while before we did the wholesale update of the residential zoning districts. And this is primarily based on conversations we had in the north side when we were doing the north side neighborhood plan. And we found a lot of very specific issues. Zoning that didn't match, so a lot of commercial and manufacturing zoning on residential lots. And then where we did have residential zoning, the standards didn't match the lots of our kind of older historic neighborhoods in terms of minimum lot size and minimum lot area. So we did some quick changes to make sure that lots weren't non-conforming, to immediately allow infill to happen, home repair, expansion projects to happen without the zoning code being the barrier. We then created 3 new districts. Again, this was following our first neighborhood plan, specifically the North Side plan. Those are all mixed-use districts, and we mapped those on the north side. Later, we mapped them on the east side and around downtown. And just before COVID hit, we were starting to look at mapping them in Edison and Vine. We updated the parking standards because we needed to make sure that with our new districts that we had parking standards that actually worked with those lots and lot requirements and unit sizes. We did 2 natural features protection zoning overlay edits. We created 3 downtown districts, replacing the 1 old downtown district that existed. And then most recently, we had some text edits to the zoning code that were based on staff and the Zoning Board of Appeals and our local community using the zoning code, and some tweaks that we needed to make its application better. What I don't have in here, now that I realize, is that there's an 8th change that we made, and that was to add adult use and medical marijuana to the zoning code. So what I'm going to specifically talk about tonight is the commercial zoning code update that will be coming to this fall. So there are 4 pieces to this. An update of the sign code, an update of the landscaping, screening, and fencing requirements, new and updated commercial districts, an updated zoning map, which is really the biggest piece of all of this. And then just a preview, once we're done with that, we'll be turning to the residential districts. And we expect to do that next year, early next year. So I just want to quickly talk about the pieces. Again, this is all going to eventually come to you. We'll be going to the community first, then to the Plan Commission, who will make their recommendation to this body, and then ultimately to you for approval. So all these pieces are related to commercial districts. So the first one is the sign code. The sign code we actually wrote last year, but decided to hold on to it until we did this update, so it would be accurate with all the new districts. It's available online and has been. There's a presentation with audio. We sent it out to the sign companies in town to get their feedback. We sent it to developers to get their feedback, made some tweaks, and pretty much have this part ready to go to the community when we start the public outreach process. And a draft of that is available on imaginekalamazoo.com. The changes in the sign code both simplify the document, pick up where we have a lot of variance requests right now based on signs. And there's been some Supreme Court cases that impact sign regulations. And so we've made sure that our regulations are up to date with those Supreme Court cases. Landscaping, screening, and fencing, pretty integrally tied with commercial development, especially when there are parking lots or landscaping required around buildings. Staff has started to update this document. It is not yet done. We're also working with the Natural Features Protection Board as it relates to rethinking the permitted tree list or recommended tree list for landscaping that's done along parking lots, around buildings, and so forth, to make sure that those documents are talking to each other. This also includes fence regulations, which of course goes with both residential and commercial. So here's kind of the meat, right? This is a list of the commercial districts we currently have in the zoning code. Commercial office, commercial neighborhood office, of which the second of those is not mapped anywhere, just exists in the zoning document. We have commercial neighborhood 1 and 2, of which 2 is not mapped currently, just exists in the zoning code. We have CC, community commercial, which is mapped throughout the city on big lots and small lots. We have 2 mixed-use districts that I kind of think of as twins. One veers a little more commercial, one veers slightly more residential, but that's commercial mixed use and residential mixed use. And then we have the districts that we created recently, Neighborhood Node, Live Work 1, Live Work 2, and we have the BTR Park zoning, which is a very specific classification for Western Michigan University's Business, Technology, and Research Park. That's at Drake and Parkview. In addition to those rules, we also have a series of overlays that impact commercial development. 2 of these are not currently mapped, but could be if we had chosen to. The first one is neighborhood conservation overlay, and the second one is historic preservation overlay. Neither of those are mapped, but they exist to be created in the zoning code. We have the riverfront overlay districts. This is a series of 9 sub-districts that go on top of the base zoning that dictate more specific use requirements and specific design criteria. It is a set of overlay districts that have been very difficult to regulate. We have found that we have a lot of business owners bump up against them because the use parameters in them are very, very narrow for the most part. And this primarily exists where the north side neighborhood and the east side neighborhood meet, adjacent to the river, north and south, east and west of that area. And then the final set of standards is not zoning, but it's design guidelines, and it does serve as another layer whenever you are doing a project in these areas, is the downtown and southtown design guidelines. And so all of these things are going to be under review as we move forward. And here's how it's starting to shake out. In doing research with a consultant team that helped us compile lot sizes, intensity of development, locations of those developments throughout the city, we have created a new zoning district and are going to be, or two new zoning districts, and are going to be removing several other districts from the code moving forward. So CO, CNO, those office districts, which are really have a narrow set of uses allowed, mostly office related, will no longer be in the code. The two neighborhood districts, CN1 and CN2, are proposed also to no longer be permitted. Those are two districts that allow a small number of commercial uses, but they're only allowed up to a certain amount of square feet. I believe it's 2,500 square feet, which we have found is kind of an artificial number, and we have businesses that would be appropriate, can go into buildings in those areas, but can't meet that requirement, among a couple of other issues. And then CMO and CMU and RMU, because we have new mixed-use districts that we created that we think are more applicable. So what does that leave us with? We keep our CC district, our community commercial district. That is that district that is meant to support regional commercial shopping. And then we create a smaller district, we'll call it CC2 for now, which would allow for a general list of uses, but not of the scale and size that you find out by the highway that is appropriate for the community commercial district. And then in the other places where we remove the commercial neighborhood zoning or the commercial office zoning based on market area, whether the area is auto-oriented or pedestrian-oriented, the building size, lot size in that area, the street type that it's located on, is it located to serve residential, will help determine what specific district the CNO, CN1, everything that we're removing gets put into. And the BTR district is not changing. It'll just be brought over from Appendix A into the zoning code, Chapter 50. This is how to kind of differentiate these three districts, the three commercial districts. This is the definitions that we're starting to work with. So I'm going to start kind of in opposite order, with the biggest, CC, community commercial, most intense, probably is the better way of saying this. CC supports medium to large commercial development with citywide and regional market focus. This is essentially what it was created to do back in 2005, based on the definition. It's typically found on major streets, but somewhere along the line we used it throughout the city, where it's best served on larger lots with faster roads. CC2, that slightly smaller district that would replace some of our neighborhood office or commercial districts, meant to support small to medium commercial and mixed-use development on smaller streets, typically streets that have residential blocks that tie into them. So it's at the end of a residential block versus large lots that don't tie to residences. And I have a picture. I'll show it to you in just a second. And then the third district is commercial node. Now, if you recall from the 2025 master plan, future land use plan, we had neighborhood nodes and commercial nodes mapped. We created the neighborhood node district right away because we were doing zoning work in neighborhoods that had a neighborhood node based on the future land use plan. Now it's time to do the commercial nodes, and so we're creating a district that's appropriate for that. So here's an example for you. So we have two commercial corridors here. The one on, I think it's your right, Stadium Drive versus West Edge. And so here's where we start to differentiate between CC and CC2. So on Stadium Drive, it's mostly large lots. There are some smaller lots there as well, but mostly large. They're not linked to the residential, even though there's residential that abuts them on one side. It's completely accessed from the neighborhood. They're completely separate. It's not walkable, and it's pretty intense development on a street that, with a pretty high speed, compared to the West Edge corridor, just south of White's Cork intersection, right? The pink that you see there is at the end of residential blocks, so it serves those residents. They can walk there, they could bike there, they could drive there, but it's close by. It tends to be smaller in scale, and the buildings themselves are smaller. And so we went through, oh, there's the streets. We went through and did this analysis along major commercial corridors throughout the city to understand what that looked like in terms of lot sizes and if there were common groupings, so we could create our dimensional standards to fit this. And so, without going into too much detail, we did it on West Edge, we did it on Portage Street to figure out the groupings, and here's an example of the neighborhood node and the commercial node and how we'd be matching them up in reality to the future land use plan. And so we've started to create the dimensional standards, because you remember with every zoning district you have the permitted uses and you have the standards that dictate how the buildings can be developed. And so we're in the process of working those up for our 2 new districts, commercial node and CC2. And our timeline for this work is we should have an updated zoning map out to the public for their review end of this month, very beginning of September. Just like we did for the natural features protection, we're going to have that map online. It's going to be interactive, so you can click on it, understand, you know, the address, what it's zoned today, what it's being zoned to, and some additional information behind that change. And so that will be up, again, end of August, beginning of September. We'll do public presentations, answer questions, send notice to properties that are being rezoned, with an expected review and approval in that formal sense at the end of the year. Does anybody have any questions for me? I know it was kind of a lot of information.
Questions at this time, commissioners? Commissioner Hess. I'm sorry.
A while back, Christina, are we going to go through the, oh, that was it, okay. A while back, you noted downtown and Southtown. Will you please differentiate between what you mean by Southtown and what neighbors say is a Southtown neighborhood? Can you talk to us about that, please?
I can talk a little bit about it. So both of these design guideline areas were created prior to me taking the role of city planner. Downtown design guidelines were created first, and then they found the need to create a set of design guidelines kind of in a half moon around the south and east part of downtown as that area started to redevelop. They are design guideline boundaries. The 2 documents share a set of standards, and neither are really going to be necessary once the zoning is done, because the districts that are going to be located there are our form-based districts. So we had, when we did our downtown districts, when we updated the downtown zoning, we created 3 new districts. And they were districts that were kind of a marriage between the typical use requirements in a zoning code with some additional form requirements. And it made the downtown design guideline standards essentially unnecessary. And so we need to remove those from that area. When we did the downtown design, the downtown zoning, the ring around downtown, almost in the same area that the Southtown design guidelines are, we've started to map our Live Work 1 and Live Work 2 districts, which also includes some of those form standards, which render the design guidelines kind of obsolete, right? Because the code requires things, design guidelines recommend things, and then you go to a board who can you negotiate with to kind of get the final product. And so that's the difference between code and design guidelines. Now, to answer your question, as to whether or not the original Southtown design guideline boundaries match with the boundaries that we've heard from some callers. I would have to go back and look at the two maps to understand the areas. I don't believe that the Southtown design guidelines are all that large an area, but I would need the map in front of me to answer that.
Commissioner Decker.
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to say, when you said that these zoning codes hadn't been updated since 2005, that's a long time. And that's a long time for a community and a city to change and to grow and to have different objectives. So thank you guys for starting to do what you're doing at this time. I think it is going to be beneficial, especially when you talk about the neighborhoods and the commercial zonings. And, if this is some of the reasons and some of the issues that have been holding back businesses from coming to the area, hopefully this will, kind of get those out of the way and we can start getting more businesses into the businesses and empty spaces that we have. So thank you to you and your team.
Thanks.
Thank you, Commissioner Decker. Other questions from commissioners at this point? Seeing none at this time, I have a few.
Okay.
So I'm going to ask a big question first. Why do we even have zoning? Why do we pay so much attention to that? Why zone at all?
So Clyde might, in terms of the legality, I'll let Clyde clarify if I say this wrong, but we do have a master plan, and if you have a master plan in Michigan, you need to have a zoning code. Did I say that right? Maybe I said it the opposite way. But, okay, so
So let's say
they're tied
Houston is a
together.
place that's famous for not zoning.
Right, right. So in the past, zoning was really meant to segregate, right? Segregate uses, in many cases, segregate people was the intent of zoning and a lot of housing policy. And that stems from a Supreme Court case in the 20s in Euclid, Ohio, that allowed this type of regulation. And it morphed, some in good ways, some not good ways, and was used in ways that hurt cities and hurt residents of cities. Over time, zoning has started to, especially in the last 5 to 10 years, to adjust to think about how we can support a livable community. How can we support walkability? How can we support giving the opportunity for neighborhoods to be fully functional, meaning you can meet your daily needs and live in those neighborhoods wherever you choose. And so zoning can help do that. If you don't think about where things are allowed and how to kind of commingle things, I think you automatically go to the, this is over here, this is over here, and unless you happen to, occasionally it happens organically that they're together, but not, you're running a risk. So today we view zoning as supporting those characteristics that we're looking for in our community. So we want to make sure that there is housing that meets our entire community's need, every price point, every size. And so we can help support that by making sure that our zoning regulations relate to housing are allow those types all over the community without a lot of steps and hiccups along the way. We can make sure that we are supporting the principles of, it's often called a 15-minute community, sometimes a 20-minute community, where you, in theory, could live, work, play within a walking distance of your home, whatever home size you choose or is available, and to think consciously about where you can allow a mix of uses. And so I think that zoning plays that role today, as opposed to, we would like zoning to play that role today, as opposed to, this use over here and this use over here. It certainly is a different philosophy with how it's being used.
I appreciate that, and I don't know if you want to say anything more about it, but I think in some ways you've answered. My next question was, how do we do the best job we can of incorporating best practice thinking into our zoning and inclusive thinking into our zoning versus zoning that did create either unintended or intended consequences? So how do we keep ourselves fresh and thoughtful around that, I guess, as any given, modest-sized community in the country that has the opportunity to manage your own zoning does.
I mean, I think one, you have a community vision, right? So we have Imagine Kalamazoo, which created the strategic vision, our master plan and future land use plan, which really set the tone for making sure that we have housing for all of our residents. Increase, that those inviting public places and livability. And in the past, we haven't viewed transportation and land use as two pieces of the same puzzle, or the same pie. They are, right? You're not going to have a super inviting, I'm comfortable my kids walking to school or up to the corner store if you don't have the streets right and the land use right. So incorporating that into your vision and into the plan is important. So if the zoning code is intended to allow the vision, I really think that that's the number one priority, right? And so we did that, and we had a community process around Imagine Kalamazoo. Since then, for every zoning change, we go back out. This is what we heard. Here's what neighborhood plans say. Here's how the different districts, the research that we did to kind of figure out lot sizes and those kind of things. Here's how it's shaking out. Let's talk about it. What does it mean for you? And so we'll continue that with each of these incremental changes.
I appreciate that. Hey, one of the things I just wanted to, I guess, accentuate just a little bit here. You got your one page where you talked about rationale. I don't know if you want to expand on that just a little bit, because I think that's really important. Like, I know you're talking about the vision and how you manifest that in a zoning code, but some specifics you mentioned here also, I think, are important on that rationale side.
Sure. So this specifically was talking about, the districts that we have grayed out in the far column that we right now are expecting to go away. There's not always a one-to-one. CN1 is automatically going to become Liverk 1 because the districts have been mapped all over the place, so it's not necessarily perfectly one-to-one. So how do we think about that? And these rationale are meant to kind of embody the things that we'll be thinking about as we start to do a draft map for the community to discuss and react to. And so it's things like the street type, right? High-speed streets probably aren't necessarily, if it's that is the street and that is what the street is supposed to be, that's probably not going to be where we want to have walkable, commercial, small scale built up to the street, right? That you're going to have to account for parking lots and think about, stormwater and those kind of things. And so it's a different type of development. It kind of goes to the scale. Again, is it serving residential? I really like that Stadium Drive example versus the West Edge because it's kind of the most stark example on, how those are served. And again, thinking about that concept of, 15-minute neighborhood, what can I get to very easily, and how those relate to each other. And then, with scale, you want any development that comes in, you want to make sure you're setting it up for success as much as the zoning code can do that. So, if you have areas, if you want to have regional commercial, citywide, adjacent neighborhood commercial, you want to make sure that you're putting that closer to the highway, closer to the major streets. And so that's why street type plays a role. That's going to attract the broader, larger commercial development, as opposed to a small lot that, you travel through town to get to. So it's just different types in different places and trying to be thoughtful about what that looks like.
I appreciate that. One other very specific question that, sometimes confusing to people is in zoning codes, and I don't know how much it comes up on the commercial side, is that permitted use versus special use and how that gets determined, and what's the best practice about how, when you're writing a zoning code, how much of that you want incorporated or how you approach those kind of issues.
Absolutely. And I think this is something else that's changed with zoning. So again, when zoning was, you must go here, you go there, we're separating all the uses. Zoning departments also like to say, you're going to have to come to me. I'm going to interpret this complicated document for you, and I'm going to, you have permission for a variety of uses that may or may not have an impact, negative impact, perceived or real. Again, I think zoning has changed. The perception of zoning has changed. We want zoning again to set the table for the things that the vision says we should allow, and not create extra barriers and hiccups. So really being very thoughtful on what requires an extra step to the Plan Commission, which a special use does. And so the way we have the code set up now, the work that we've been doing over the last couple years, is we have permitted uses, and then we have uses that are permitted with some development standards. And those don't require an extra step, but you need to incorporate that into your design. And we do that to make sure that we can handle some of those potentially negative externalities, but not to the point that we need a special use. And so the uses that fall into the special use, it's a smaller list than what we had previously.
Thank you very much. So one thing I would just like to recognize here is I appreciate that we're taking time to go back and talk about this, because these kinds of processes can actually occur over several commission terms. And so sometimes just being plopped into the middle of it, or having something come on your agenda on a given evening, which is actually, part whatever, 7 of a, 16-step process that started years ago, it's hard to always be aware of that context. So I just want to thank you, Manager Ritzma and Christina, for just talking about that. And I think it's just something we're going to have to continue to do, is provide some of that context. Here's the whole long journey that we're on together, who some of you were here at the beginning and some of you weren't, and some of you will be here at the end and some of you won't. And this is the reason for that vision. It isn't just coming out of nowhere. It's really part of a long built process. So I appreciate that very, very much. Manager Ritzma.
Well, that concludes the work session component of this evening, so I'll turn it back over to you.
All right, I appreciate that. Let me see. I know that we did get another document. Are we going to be talking
Yeah,
about that?
that'll be at the regular meeting,
At the regular meeting. Okay, great.
the resolution on the regular agenda.
Okay, super. All right, thanks so much. Now is the opportunity for commissioner comments for the committee of the whole meeting. Are there any commissioner comments? All right, seeing none, just a reminder, our business meeting starts at 7 o'clock. There'll be another opportunity for public comments at our business meeting at 7, which you can call in for or also make here in person. Look forward to seeing you at 7 o'clock. We're adjourned.